Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Corey Evan, coming up in The Weekender. The Iran nuclear deal may be making their president happy, but not us here at SHR Media. Seems now you can be jailed in France if you hire a model that they deem to be too skinny in our continuing battle against global socialism. An attorney and a former narcotics officer make it into Crime and Pinheads? It just can't be so. A Price is Right model has a blonde moment in our game show News Minute. And today, we're looking at the classifieds, ladies and gentlemen. Oh yes, it's a real Easter egg of a show this time. The Weekender starts now.
Making sense of the week's news and most of your weekend from Southern California. This is the SHR Weekender with Corey Evans.
Happy Easter, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for tuning in to this special Easter edition of the SHR Weekender. Let's get right into it. Let's break this egg open. We start with this one from the AFP News Agency. President Obama now has a framework nuclear deal with America's Iranian foe, but as he tries to build it into a binding accord, he faces enemies closer to home. Can he prevent the U.S. Congress from torpedoing his diplomatic efforts to contain Tehran, as they call it? Obama said Thursday, quote, "If Congress kills this deal, not based on expert analysis and without offering any reasonable alternative, then it's the United States that will be blamed for failure of diplomacy. International unity will collapse and the path to conflict will widen." Really now, Mr. President. Any rate, he has not denied Congress's role in the process. His aides regularly troop to Capitol Hill to inform and consult members of the Republican-controlled legislature. His chiefs of diplomacy, defense, the Treasury, and the military have all appeared before the Senate and the House of Representatives to address lawmakers' qualms over the negotiations. On Thursday, the outlines of a final deal were unveiled in Switzerland after negotiations between 6 world powers and Iran. A final deal is to be completed by June 30th, they say. But U.S. lawmakers have proven tough to win over and still have deep reservations, some real, some perhaps politically opportunistic. Opponents of a deal believe Obama is obsessed with his place in history and has made too many concessions, abandoning U.S. allies Israel and Saudi in the process. Yes, absolutely he has. Their eyes fixed on the 2016 elections, Republicans have sought to impose their own criteria on the deal, raising a bar that by design is higher than the commander-in-chief's. The halting of all uranium enrichment by Iran, transparency of its military programs, and closure of its underground facility at Fordo. Supposedly thanks to the efforts of the Democratic minority in Congress, the administration has so far succeeded in using parliamentary procedures to delay 2 bills on Iran. The furthest advanced of the 2 is the Corker-Menendez bill, sponsored by the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Corker, and Democrat Robert Menendez. It would give Congress the right to review any final agreement before any U.S. sanctions on Iran are lifted. Of course, Obama has vowed to veto the bill in its current form, as well as a separate bill that would impose additional sanctions on Iran, as he usually does. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't exactly have our best interests at heart, it would sound to us here at the SHR Media Network. And it's making me nervous just thinking about it. And if you have any additional questions, just ask my co-host on the Evan Miller Report, Jason Miller. He is the authority on this issue. Next up from the AP, a Philadelphia woman was arrested Friday on charges she tried to join and martyr herself for the Islamic State group a day after 2 women in New York were charged with plotting to wage jihad by building a bomb and using it for a Boston Marathon-type attack. Kiana Thomas was preparing to fly to Spain with hopes of reaching Syria to fight with the terror group, authorities said. Instead, she was arrested at her family's townhouse in a public housing development which has 3 small U.S. flags adorning the porch. Authorities said she communicated with an ISIS group fighter in Syria who asked if she wanted to be part of a martyrdom operation. She told the fighter that the opportunity would be amazing. A girl can only wish, according to the documents. Well, I wish this girl wouldn't wish. Anyway, a federal magistrate ordered Thomas held pending a detention hearing Wednesday. Prosecutors will oppose bail. Last month, Thomas bought a ticket to fly to Barcelona on March 29th. She likely planned to take a bus to Istanbul and then reach Syria, according to an FBI affidavit filed in the case. Authorities put a stop to the trip, which I like to call Istanbul crap, when they raided her house on March 27th. In court, Thomas wore a burqa as she acknowledged she understood the charges against her, attempting to provide material support and resources to a foreign terrorist organization. She was appointed a public defender who did not comment on the charge. Thomas appeared to show little emotion as she was led out of the house Friday morning in handcuffs, according to neighbor Ronnie Patterson. Patterson said she had seen investigators searching the home where Thomas appeared to live with her mother and grandmother a week ago. The women in the New York case are accused of plotting to wage violent jihad by building a bomb and using it for an attack like the 2013 Boston Marathon bombings. They were ordered held without bail after a brief court appearance Thursday. The lawyer for one of them said his client will plead not guilty. An Alabama man has been freed after spending nearly 30 years on death row. This from the BBC. Anthony Ray Hinton was convicted of murdering 2 restaurant managers in Birmingham in 1985, but was granted a new trial last year. Tests on bullets found at the crime scene couldn't be connected to a gun found at Mr. Hinton's home, prompting prosecutors to drop that case. His lawyer, Brian Stevenson, said his client was convicted because he couldn't afford better legal counsel. Walking out of the Jefferson County Jail in Birmingham, Mr. Hinton hugged family members and said, "Thank you, Jesus." Bullets from the crime scene were the only evidence that linked Mr. Hinton to the murders. Prosecutors say that modern forensic methods failed to link the bullets to a revolver found in Mr. Hinton's home. At his first trial, Mr. Hinton's lawyer believed his client only had $1,000 to hire an expert that could defend against the prosecution's allegations about the bullets. The lawyer hired the only expert willing to take the job at that rate, and jurors reportedly laughed as the expert struggled to answer questions during cross-examination. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled last year that Mr. Hinton didn't have adequate legal counsel at the first trial and said the case should be reconsidered at a second trial. A union caucus representing dock workers at West Coast ports voted to recommend to its members a labor contract deal reached over months of negotiations that led to major disruptions to trans-Pacific trade, according to the U.S. Department of Labor in a report to Reuters. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union reached a tentative 5-year agreement with the Pacific Maritime Association, representing a group of shippers, on February 20th, with the help of a federal mediator and intervention by U.S. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez. The deal is subject to ratification by the union rank and file, of course. During 9 months of talks between dock workers and shippers, tensions arose and played out in chronic cargo backups that increasingly slowed freight traffic at the ports. As of this week, cargo traffic congestion was continuing to ease slowly. Port officials said it would take several more weeks for freight traffic to return to normal. Which, when you have an economy that mainly depends on goods, that's not really a good thing for the economy in general, wherever a strike happens. Especially when it comes in from China. Speaking of China, they charged former security chief Zhao Yongkang on Friday with taking bribes, abusing his power, and disclosing state secrets, paving the way for one of the most significant political trials in the country in decades, and underlining President Xi Jinping's dramatic consolidation of power. Zhao presided over the nation's huge and powerful state security apparatus, including police and intelligence agencies, until his retirement in 2012, enforcing Communist Party control through a massive network of surveillance and repression. He was hated by many and feared by almost everyone. Zhao also controlled much of the country's huge oil industry, having risen to power through its ranks. He was a key member of the party's top body, the Politburo Standing Committee. His downfall breaks an unwritten rule in place for decades that made members of the Standing Committee immune from prosecution even after retirement. The indictment accused Zhao of illegally accepting huge bribes, taking advantage of his position to seek benefits for others, abusing his power, intentionally disclosing state secrets, and, quote, causing heavy losses to public property, the state, and the people, according to the top prosecutor in China, in a statement on his office's website. Zhao was arrested and expelled from the party last year, and the formal charges came as no surprise. The government has presented his arrest as a centerpiece of Xi's determination to root out corruption and proof that even senior political party members are not above the law. In reality, experts said, given that corruption is widespread throughout the party, Zhao's downfall is more likely to represent Xi's victory over a rival faction that had attempted to block his rise. The charges had been rumored long before they were made public, and Zhao's downfall came only after intense behind-the-scenes negotiations between powerful Communist Party leaders, according to experts. Zhao's allies included Bo Xilai, the charismatic former party chief of Chongqing, who was sentenced to life imprisonment for corruption in September 2013, and General Zhu Kaihu, who died of bladder cancer while under arrest on similar charges last month. No date has been set yet. State media promised last month that the trial would be open, although diplomats and independent journalists are almost certain to be barred and official reports carefully censored, and then carefully analyzed and uncensored by all of us here at SHR Media. And we will bring you those details as they become available, and I have a feeling we're gonna have to do a lot of picking apart on this one. Ho ho ho. But for the moment, it's time to pick apart the latest items in our continuing battle against global socialism. According to QZ.com, or QZ.com if you're listening in Canada, the French Parliament has passed a measure that bans modeling agencies and fashion brands from employing models the government deems too thin. Now models will be required to present medical documentation of a BMI of at least 18, according to Reuters. People who employ models who fail to meet the requirement could face 6 months in prison and a fine of about 75,000 euros, or about 82 grand in our money. The amendment, which passed yesterday, is part of a larger effort to combat eating disorders in France. Health Minister Marisol Touraine has said the law aims to protect not only the health of models themselves, but also that of the young women who try to emulate them. Parliament passed an amendment earlier this week targeting websites that encourage, quote, excessive thinness and unhealthy eating restrictions. These efforts face an uphill battle given the ubiquity of images of very thin models and actresses. Social media platforms such as Tumblr and Instagram are rife with thinspiration, and while many sites and platforms have policies discouraging or banning these disturbing images and message, some people argue that they could hold some value for women with eating disorders seeking social support and self-expression online. Other countries and organizations have tried similar regulations. Both Italy and Israel have issued BMI requirements, and in New York, the Council of Fashion Designers of America has formed a committee and hosted events for discussing and promoting healthier lifestyles for models, and healthier body images for those who admire them, but the guidelines are fairly nebulous beyond age requirements for runway modeling and curfews for minors. Next up from WND News, the owners of a family-owned and operated pizza shop in Indiana say they won't cater same-sex weddings because the newly passed Religious Freedom Restoration Act gives them the right to refuse such services. Crystal O'Connor of Memories Pizza in Walkerton to a local ABC affiliate said, quote, if a gay couple came in and wanted us to provide pizzas for their wedding, we would have to say no. She went on, also saying, we're not discriminating against anyone, that's just our belief and anyone has the right to believe in anything. Yes, they do in America. Her remarks come on the heels of an announcement from Indiana Republican Governor Mike Pence to direct the legislature to clarify facets of the new law that opponents say give businesses a government stamp of approval to discriminate. Law supporters say the measure only mirrors what other states have in place, and its overall aim is to make sure government doesn't intrude on the First Amendment freedoms. Pence has emphasized both verbally and in an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, the law can't be taken to mean businesses can discriminate against gays. But he did admit his state is facing a perception problem with its implementation, and the legislature needs to add language making it clear discrimination against gays is not acceptable or lawful. The pizza place, meanwhile, has suffered some negative feedback for its stance. Yelp users posted dozens of subpar ratings about the business, complaining of the owner's view of serving gays, The Hill reported. Which I think they have the right to say no if they don't feel that it's right to cater a gay wedding. Because if they have religious views that prohibit them from doing so, what is the government to tell them that they have to? And this one is disgusting. Out of Georgia, according to the New York Times, the Justice Department put the nation's prisons and jails on notice Friday that it regarded blanket policies prohibiting new hormone treatment for transgender inmates to be unconstitutional. In court documents, the Justice Department backed a lawsuit brought by a prison inmate who says the state of Georgia illegally cut off the hormone treatment that she'd been taking for 17 years. It's believed to be the first time that the Justice Department has weighed in on the question of whether hormone therapy for transgender inmates is necessary medical care that states are required to provide. She has attempted suicide and self-castration multiple times, her lawyers said. Gwendolyn Hogan, a spokeswoman for the Georgia Department of Corrections, said that the department could not comment on active lawsuits. Prison medical records filed in court show that mental health professionals found Ms. Diamond had gender dysphoria, a recognized condition formerly known as gender identity disorder. So, just great. Your federal taxes now going to hormone treatment for prisoners. That's disgusting. So, how many more freebies will the federal government give out to prisoners? How many more restrictions will they put on businesses about what they can and cannot express religiously? And how come pizza places aren't open at 9:30 a.m. in the morning? Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism. Right, it's time for me to take a break, but when I come back, it's all about drugs and drug enforcement in our Crime and Pinhead segment. A model worries about losing her job after revealing the price of a car on The Price is Right before she's supposed to. And I've got your classifieds right here, and we're going to look at them after the break on the SHR Weekender. You're listening to SHR Media.
I'm Jason Miller from the Evan Miller Report. Each weeknight, I take you around the world with the latest in world news and politics, not the least of which what's going on in good old Washington, D.C. In short, I'm telling you what the government doesn't want me to.
Join me, Corey Evan, and Jason Miller for the Evan Miller Report, weeknights at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on shrmedia.com. Also on the iHeartRadio app.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Once again, here's Corey Evan with the SHR Weekender on shrmedia.com.
Thank you as always, Sackhead Sean. Sackhead Sean, one of the 3 Sackheads on Sackheads Radio, every Sackhead Wednesday at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on Sackheads Radio's home station, SHR Media. I just said Sackheads too many times. Never mind, let's just find out who botched their crimes this week in Crime and Pinheads. It's that time of the week again where we look at crimes that were committed so horrendously it was only a matter of time before we got to hear about it. Though you might be surprised at this first story. A defense lawyer who left a baggie containing 2 ounces of marijuana on a courtroom bench has agreed to pay a $150 fine to resolve the infraction, according to the Huffington Post. Vincent J. Fazzone was in a courtroom in New London, Connecticut Tuesday morning when the pot allegedly fell out of his back pocket in front of the marshals, his paralegal Holly McGregor told the Hartford Courant. Quote, when he got up with his client, it fell out of his back pocket, McGregor said. After he was done with the judge, the marshal said, when you're done speaking with your client, we need to talk to you. The baggie allegedly contained 2 ounces of a green, leafy plant-like substance that was suspected to be marijuana, according to the Norwich Bulletin. McGregor said her boss doesn't smoke pot and that he received the weed from a client who allegedly took it from her child and asked Fazzone to confront the kid later in the day about the dangers of drugs, theday.com reports. Fazzone was ticketed for possession and has agreed to pay a $150 fine. He wants to put the matter behind him, according to the AP. He's gonna be facing himself in front of the mirror again, ladies and gentlemen. I love the name of Fazzone. It makes me want to speak Italian. No? Forget it. Next up, according to NBC Philadelphia, lawyers for 6 former police officers charged with stealing millions of dollars in cash and drugs while working undercover attacked the Justice Department case Monday as a fable crafted by 19 drug dealers and a dirty colleague. Hundreds of cases based on the Philadelphia drug unit's work have been thrown out, and about 100 civil rights lawsuits are on hold awaiting the outcome of the 26-count racketeering trial. Assistant U.S. Attorney Anthony Zorek told jurors that even drug dealers can be victims of crime if the items seized are not yours to take. The armed defendants routinely broke into homes without search warrants and ransacked them to steal drugs, cash, a Rolex watch, and other valuables, he said. Defense lawyer Jack McMahon fired back that the government had no evidence to back up the testimony of their criminal witnesses, including convicted ex-officer Jeffrey Walker. Walker began cooperating after he took the bait in an FBI sting focused on the aggressive narcotics field unit within the Philadelphia Police Department. He admitted in a February 2014 plea that he had planted evidence in a suspect's car and taken $15,000 from him. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Even the drug enforcement officers themselves can indeed become criminals themselves and steal thousands, if not millions of dollars from their would-be captives. And you can see a theme going in this week's Crime and Pinheads as I come to one from Fox Atlanta. Out of Dunwoody, Georgia, police say a man went to the police department to bail his girlfriend out of jail. The problem was, police say Ladarius Carmichael was stoned and armed. Police say when Carmichael walked into the police department, it was obvious he had been smoking. Police then checked out the Carmichael's car in the parking lot and say they found a lot more. Officer Silla said, quote, there was marijuana in the car and there was also a loaded gun in plain view. Police say just when you start to think people would know better than to show up at a police department with dope and a gun, something like this happens. And I think that's about right, because there are some folks who just don't give a hoot about watching their backside. And that's exactly how a lot of them end up in the pokey. And just so you know, police say they let Carmichael pay off his girlfriend's bond just before they hauled him to jail. Trading places, are you guys? Well, Mr. Carmichael, I hope you enjoy your stay behind bars. Dumb criminals beware, I'm watching you. I'll see you next week in Crime and Pinheads. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the first weekend of the month. It's time to look at the classifieds. Yes, folks are looking to sell and buy stuff, get a date, get a job, whatever. But you certainly won't be looking for a job if you're just sitting on the couch looking at the free old TV you found, which is non-working. Oh yes, and they threw in a mattress, a flat, good-shaped, 2 old sawhorses. Imagine that. You can make up for a non-working TV with a free mattress and some sawhorses. That's amazing. And while you're sitting on the couch, you could probably call up the swamp cooler guy to make sure your swamp cooler is in good nick. But I don't trust the ones that have bad grammar, like this guy. Swamp coolers are me. You is swamp coolers? Just imagine the guy walking in and he's made entirely of swamp cooler stuff. He's your knight in cooling armor. The Green Sheets, one of those awesome little places where you can find local stuff for sale. And if you're dealing with certain medical issues, probably find a way to get some trials done on you. Like this one out of Riverside, California. Study number 1, constipation caused by opioid pain meds. Opioid? I know they meant to say opioid, but they do make it sound opioid, and I kind of feel bad for the girl who's featured in the ad. Looks like she's got a stomach ache. Love her. But you know what they say about women? Weak stomach, strong heart. Here's one. If you're looking for a new home, you should turn to a realtor because they're the ones that know what they're doing. But I'm not sure if you want to go with this one out of Yucaipa. They're called Moist Realtors. Yes, they have the name Moist on the front there. You guys really should consider changing your name because when I think Moist, I think of a flood-damaged home. I mean, it would be fun if I were a fish, but otherwise, nah. Here's one for food distribution in Southern California. But the title of it does have me confused a little bit. It says, Free Government. Yes, the government is giving so many things away these days, even they are for free now. Imagine that. Senator Harry Reid giving himself away to one of his constituents. Oh. That was wrong. Forget I said that. Here are a couple that Sackhead Sean actually sent me earlier. Like this one out of Omaha. For a free goat. And here's what the caption says. Hey, I got a goat a while back. I was trying to have more of an erotic pet, but it's not going... Erotic?! Don't you mean exotic? Because I don't deal with bestiality. No, I don't do any of that. Or even worse, out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, regarding my human female, it seems I have come to an impasse with my time. My human requires a companion. He has become quite bothersome to my plans of household destruction, thwarting my efforts to conquer the entire space. That's where you come into my devious plan. I wish for you to distract my human. Take him out of the dwelling for periods of time so I may see my plans come to fruition. With his attention off of myself, I may go about my plans uninhibited. The cat then goes on to detail about his human, and then at the end he says, Should you help with my efforts, I will grace your lap with my presence and purr to my satisfaction. This is by far the highest regard one can give. Until then, human, cat. And I've got one more for you guys. This is one I found on Craigslist. You can rent a designer apartment home at the Crescent at West Hollywood. which has got a gas stove, wood floors, granite countertops. It's got 1 bed, 1 bath for $21.79 to $44.39 a month. But here's what gets me about this ad. It says you can save on your rent with a flexible lease length and move-in date. If you're paying almost $4,000 a month, how are you saving on your rent? Right, those are your classifieds for the month of April. If you spot a hilarious Easter egg of a want ad, hit print screen Command-Shift-4 or take a picture of it and send it to facebook.com/SHR Weekender or email it to me at cevan@shrmedia.com. After the break, Drew Carey deals with an embarrassed model in our Game Show News Minute. And this week's tip of the week is for all of you who are making home improvements this week. You're listening to SHR Media's The SHR Weekender. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
I'm Corey Evan, the Game Show Geek. It is Saturday, April 4th, 2015. Here is your Game Show News Minute. A contestant on The Price is Right had a little help from one of the models with winning a $21,960 car. The contestant had 3 guesses to guess the price of the car, and she started at the top with $19,849. Nope. But for some reason, the model took off that price, then took one of the prices below without prompting. The second price, $21,960, was the correct answer. Manuela Arbeles tried to cover it up, but it was too late. But she later tweeted that Carey couldn't have been more supportive and understanding. As far as cordiality concerned, certainly better than Bob Barker. And speaking of The Price is Right, they are on the list of nominees for the Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Game Show, along with Jeopardy and Family Feud. But somehow Drew Carey didn't make the list of Outstanding Game Show host nominees. Because Pat Sajak, Steve Harvey, Craig Ferguson, and Todd Newton is on there. Personally, I'm rooting for Todd, because I'd like to see a children's game show host win the Emmy for once. And in the UK, ITV is set to co-produce a new series of Celebrity Squares. For you American folks, it's based on Hollywood Squares. Hollywood star Warwick Davis, who made his presenting debut in the first series, will reprise his role as host. Meanwhile, Celebrity Squares resident comedians Tim Vine and Joe Wilkinson will also be returning. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. It's hip to be square and to be a winner. And I hope you'll be a winner and come back next week for another Game Show News Minute. Have a great day. But yeah, this week's tip of the week, I advise you, do your own home renovations. You don't have to shell out hundreds or even thousands of dollars to get professionals in your home to help you paint. You probably know a couple of friends at church, school, or work that know how to paint a room or two, and they're the ones that should be helping you. And you should be getting your own hands covered in paint as you help them out. You know, doing your own home renovations, it actually makes you feel good. Me and my fiancé just repainted our entire living room, and we enjoyed every minute of painting it. Though she didn't enjoy the stains in the carpet, but remember, ladies and gentlemen, that's why you need to get a tarp, some blue tape, leaving a can of paint precariously on the edge of a coffee table. And on that note, that is the SHR Weekender for this Saturday, April 4th, 2015. Follow us on Facebook.com/SHR Weekender and tweet us at SHR News Desk. For all of us here at SHR Media, I say Happy Easter, make it a great one or not, the choice is yours.